Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca. So what do you think is the best-selling digital piano on Amazon? Some hints. I've reviewed this piano, but it's not a Yamaha, it's not a Casio, it's not a Roland, it's not a Korg, and it's not a Donner. Well, the best-selling digital piano on Amazon is actually the Alesis Recital, and not the Alesis Recital Pro, but the Alesis Recital. It's really not hard to understand why it's the best-selling piano on Amazon. It has 88 true full-size semi-weighted keys. It only has 5 sounds, but they're decent sounds. It has line out ports. It has okay speakers, but it only sells for around $225 US. And while semi-weighted keys are definitely not as realistic feeling as fully weighted hammer action keys, they're a massive amount better than non-weighted synth action keys. So given the crazy low price, the Recital can be a pretty awesome option for somebody who's either just starting out or is on a budget or who wants something that weighs less than other pianos for portability's sake. So a couple of years back in my channel, somebody asked me what's a good super portable option for a piano player that is accustomed to playing fully weighted keys. I was curious about that myself, so I started reviewing a whole bunch of different keyboards to check that out. I reviewed the Yamaha Piaggio NP32 and the PSR E373, the Korg EK50, the Roland Go piano, and the Casio Tone CTS 300 and the CTS 1. After doing all of those reviews, I felt that the CTS 1 from Casio was the best option, so I actually bought one. But in all of those reviews, when I got to the other options part of my review, I always mentioned the Alesis Recital 61 as an interesting option. The Recital 61 is basically the exact same keyboard as the Alesis Recital, except it has 61 keys instead of 88. But it also has 10 voices instead of only 5. Well, on Black Friday this year, I saw the Recital 61 on sale, so I thought it was about time I finally bought one of these and did a review. So with all that out of the way, here is my review on the 61 key version of the best-selling piano on Amazon, the Alesis Recital 61. At the end of this review, I'll also talk a little bit on how the Recital stands up against the Casio Tone CTS-1. Okay, so the keys. The Alesis Recital 61 has 61 true full-size semi-weighted keys with 4 levels of touch sensitivity. While it is marketed as semi-weighted, I'm kind of assuming that this just means stiffer springs as opposed to actually having weights inside. But I could be wrong. I might need to take this piano apart one day and check that out. But the action on the Recital is definitely much heavier feeling than synth action keyboards like Yamaha's PSR E series or the Piaggio series or the Casio Tone CTS 300. And while the Roland Go piano has a slightly heavier feel than those prior 3 keyboards, and then the Casio Tone CTS-1 has a slightly heavier feeling still, and I have described the CTS-1 from Casio as feeling almost semi-weighted, the Recital still has a noticeably heavier and just a more piano-like key action and playing experience than any of these other keyboards. And by true full-size keys, I mean an octave width of about 164 to 165 millimeters. I seem to be the only reviewer that ever notices, or at least ever talks about this, but almost all non-weighted synth action keyboards that say full-size keys actually have a narrower octave width of about 159 to 160 millimeters, and quite often slightly undersized and or kind of oddly shaped black keys. For example, the black keys on my Casio Tone CTS-1 are not only a millimeter narrower each than the keys on the Recital, but they also have kind of a subtle rounded edges. In contrast, the black keys on the Recital are pretty much exactly the same dimensions and the same flat boxy shape as the black keys on my Yamaha DGX 670 or Yamaha P125 digital pianos. It's not a huge difference, and maybe more advanced players than I have no issues transitioning back and forth between these two sizes, but I have to admit that I have always found that to be challenging. I can get used to one or the other if that's all I play, but going back and forth can be frustrating at times. And since non-weighted synth action keys are very light and easy to press, I often end up grazing keys by mistake and sounding incorrect notes as a result. So out of all of the keyboards I listed above, the Yamahas and the Casios all have the narrower octave widths of around 159 to 160 millimeters. Only the Roland Go piano and the Korg EK50 have what I call true full-sized keys with octave widths of 165 millimeters. So how do these keys feel to play for somebody who's used to playing a fully weighted key action like on my Yamaha DGX 670 or my P125 pianos? Well, for me, the proper octave width and the heavier resistance definitely make the Recital 61 quite a bit easier and smoother for me to transition to than any of the other keyboards that I've mentioned. Also note that the action on the Recital 61 is the same as it is on the 88 key version of the Recital. Ever since I got the Recital 61 and started exclusively playing it or my Yamaha DGX 670, I can transition between those two very easily. If I go to play my CTS1 or my Yamaha PSR EW 425 after playing my Yamaha DGX piano for the most part, then I always start making mistakes hitting keys by accident. For voices, the Alesis Recital 61 has 10 really well chosen kind of bread and butter voices. And for piano at this low price, it has a whopping 128 notes of polyphony. The 10 voices include the renamed but identical 5 voices found on the 88 key version of the Recital, which on the Recital 61 are named grand piano, electric piano, drawbar organ, synth, and bass. And then Alesis really fills in some commonly used voice options by adding a second brighter piano, a harpsichord, a church organ, strings, and a clavichord to the 61. After having reviewed the 88 key version, I was quite excited to see these extra voices, especially the addition of the bright piano and the strings, which are both voices that I could see myself using quite a bit. Anybody playing in a church is going to be really happy to see the church organ added. The voices are super easy to select, split, and layer. I'll go over all of that, like how to do that, in the next section of the review, but how do they sound? Not bad at all, especially for the price. The main grand piano that's common to the 61 and 88 key versions of the Recital is totally okay, but the bright piano that's only on the 61 key version is really an awesome addition, and I can actually see myself using this more often than the main one. It cuts through a mix or a backing track much better than the main grand piano, which does sound good, but can be a tiny bit muddy at times. The electric piano sound, which is meant to be a Rhodes, is pretty good as well. As with most budget-level pianos, it could do with a bit more bark in the low end, but I have to admit, when I enable the reverb and also the chorus on this voice, I quite like it. Now, the main drawbar organ, especially with the rotary chorus effect enabled, I think this voice is fantastic. Here's a quick demo on the 10 voices on the Alesis Recital 61. Okay, so the user interface. When it comes to user interfaces on keyboards and digital pianos, my main sticking point is, can I see what my current settings are, and can I change the most common settings I need to change quickly and easily? Even though there's no fancy screen or anything on the Recital pianos, I've always really liked the user interface because it is so dead simple to use. Granted, part of that ease comes from the fact that there aren't many sounds and there's no extra features like rhythms or accompaniment. But you can just glance at the controls and you immediately know what voice you have selected, whether the keyboard has been layered or split, and if it's been layered, what the layered voices are. You also know whether or not you have reverb and or chorus turned on. There are digital pianos that cost $700 to $900 US, like the Casio PXS 1100 or the Roland FP30X, where you can't even look at the piano and tell what voice you have selected. And to select a voice, it's a function key combination. So each voice on the Recital is labeled and easily selectable with a button. There's a label above the button for the top voice, so that's green, so I've got acoustic piano. If I press it again, I'll have the bottom voice, and the button turns red, which is bright piano. To layer voices, you just press the layer button. Then you choose your main voice, so I'll choose the main grand piano. You press the layer button again. Then you choose the voice that you want to layer with it, so I'm going to choose strings. So I hit this button, that's synth. Hit it again, that's strings, because it's red. Now I hit layer, and then now the layer button turns amber, which means I'm ready to play, and I can tell just by glancing at the keyboard, which is awesome, what my voices are. Now for split mode, I'm going to exit layer mode, so I just press the layer button again. It just goes back to whatever my main voice was. For split mode, you select your main voice first, so I'm going to select drawbar organ. Then you hold down split, and you choose the split voice that you want. It was already on bass, but I'm just going to leave it there. And notice that when you're in split mode, though, that it doesn't show you the split voice, but for me, that's fine because I'm never going to split the keyboard with anything other than bass anyways. So now I've got bass in the left and organ in the right. Then just release the split button, and I'm back out of split mode, and I'm just back onto the drawbar organ. Now, it's also easy and really intuitive to set the split point. I'm not going to actually do this, but you just hold down the split button, and then just press whatever key you want on the keyboard to set the split point for where the left and the right hands are. And also note that the Recital is going to remember the split point that you've set when you turn the keyboard off and then back on again. So for both layered and split voices, you can adjust the relative volume of each, which is a fantastic feature at this price, but this is one of the settings that you unfortunately need to look up a function key combination in order to see in the manual. But a super important thing to note here, unlike many pianos and keyboards, including quite a few that cost a lot more money, the default relative volume settings for layers, the most common example being piano over strings, are totally usable right out of the box. In most cases, in my experience, the strings is usually too loud and overpowers the piano. But on the Recital, it's set basically the place that I would set it at. So here's a quick video showing layered and split voices, and note that I haven't edited the relative volumes at all. These are the... So while it is a cool feature to have the ability to edit relative volumes, because the levels are fine right out of the box, I probably never will. So these are function key combinations that won't annoy me because I won't need to use them. And also note that you can have split and layer modes enabled at the same time. The split voice will be in the left and both layered voices will be in the right. Now there's also a lesson mode that splits the keyboards into two halves with the same voice and same octave range, which is usually meant on a 88 key piano to have a teacher sit beside you. So you can each have the same octave range. On a 61 key keyboard that only has one headphone output, this isn't probably a feature that I could see myself using or anybody else, quite frankly, using much, but It's very easy to do. Just go back to the piano here, and then I'll hit lesson. Now, you won't be able to see my left hand, but I'm playing the second C key from the left-hand side of the piano. And then if I play this C key right here, you can see that it's the same octave range. But once again, not a feature I see most people ever using. Now for effects, you can enable reverb and or chorus simply by just hitting the effects button once for reverb, so green. Again, for chorus, turns red. Then if you want them both on, hit it a third time, it turns amber. And then you hit it again, and then it's unlit, which means there's no effects on at all. So super simple. Now to choose between the different types of reverb and chorus, you do need to use function key combinations. So now let's get to those dreaded function key combinations. While I do, pretty much despise having to use function key combinations on a piano, the nice thing about the Recital is that there's only one that I really see myself using on any kind of a regular basis, and it only requires that I remember 2 keys. So while it's not ideal, it's not too bad. And one nice thing about the function mode on the Recital is that instead of having to hold down a function button while you simultaneously hit other keys to change your settings, you just press metronome and lesson once to enter function mode. They both light up. Then you can go around and do as many different function key settings as you want, and then just press them again to exit function mode. Okay, so here are the things that you need to use key combinations for. Setting touch sensitivity. Having this as a function key combination, to be honest, isn't a huge deal. Since I only have to do this once because the Recital is going to remember that setting when I turn it back on again, which is awesome. I had a Casio PXS 1100 digital piano that's a lot more money than this that would not remember my touch sensitivity setting, and I had to hit that function key combination every time I turned the piano on. So transposing the keyboard, this is the one that I do see myself using a lot. Alesis could have made the already good user interface just that much better by adding just like a plus and minus button to the panel for transposing up or down, and then press both of them to reset to the default key of C or something like that. So these are function keys that I will either need to label on the keyboard or memorize. But again, it's super easy to do. Just hit the go into function mode by hitting those 2 buttons, and then you just have to know the 2 keys to transpose up and down. Now for octave shifting, there is an octave switch setting on the Recital that I was excited about when I read about it on the keyboard online. But it turns out it only applies to the lesson mode, where the keyboard is split into 2 halves, each with the same octave. That was a bit of a letdown for me because on 61-key keyboards, I often like to be down an octave. So to accomplish this now, I have to use those transpose keys instead and go down 12 steps, which is an octave, and then reset to default to move back up. Adding normal octave switching buttons to the panel would be a massive addition on the Recital 61. As I mentioned before, you can adjust the relative volumes of split and layered voices, which could be handy, but as I mentioned, the piano over strings is great right out of the box, so I'm probably never going to use those function keys, so I'm not going to worry about that. You also need to use function keys to set metronome tempo and time signature, but I'm fine with those being function key combinations because I never use the metronome. I'm always playing along with some rhythms of some sort. Now, choosing reverb or chorus types. There's 5 types of each, and while you can turn reverb or chorus on or off, or both of them on or off, simply by using the effects button that's nice and handy on the panel, this isn't the end of the world to me because, honestly, I don't tend to change these settings much on any keyboard I use anyways. And also, note that the keyboard will remember your preferred reverb and chorus types when it restarts, so that's also a very cool feature. Then you need function key combinations to turn pedal resonance on or off. This also gets remembered when the keyboard is restarted. This is also okay for me because it only applies to the piano voices anyway, so I just leave it on because that's what I play 90% of the time. Okay, effects. For effects, the Alesis Recital 61 has 5 choices for both reverb and chorus, and there's also an optional pedal resonance for the piano voices. Note that if you enable pedal resonance, it disables chorus. That's okay for me because I never use chorus on a piano voice anyways. For reverb, there's 3 choices that are basically increasing amounts of reverb, and then there's 2 reverb that have delay options. For chorus, there's also 3 choruses with increasing amounts of chorus, and then there's a flanger and a rotary option. Since the keyboard remembers my effects settings, I've settled on the middle level of reverb as my default setting, and for chorus, while a bit of chorus sounds cool on the electric piano, the rotary sounds so good on the organ that I've just left that as the default, and I only enable chorus when I'm using the organ sound. Now, the Recital 61 also has pedal resonance. This is disabled by default, but can be enabled if you want a slightly more realistic piano playing experience. But note that when the pedal resonance is enabled, as I mentioned, chorus is disabled. So what is pedal resonance? Well, when you press down the sustain pedal on an acoustic piano, it lifts the dampers off all of the strings, which makes it possible for all of the strings to vibrate. So when you play one note, which strikes that string with a hammer, causing it to vibrate, any other notes that are harmonically related to that note can vibrate slightly, creating a resonance sound. Since I play one of the piano voices 90% of the time and never use chorus on a piano voice, I've enabled pedal resonance by default. Here's a quick video on the reverb and chorus options as well as pedal resonance. Connectivity. Okay, for connectivity, the Alesis Recital 61 does quite well, actually, although it is missing one feature that would be super nice to have. On the back of the Recital, we have a 1/4 inch headphone port, a USB to host port for sending MIDI data to a device if you want to use the Recital as a MIDI controller. There's a 1/4 inch generic sustain pedal port. There's left and right line out ports for connecting to external audio equipment like PAs, amplifiers, mixers, or audio interfaces. This is a very welcome feature and pretty rare at this price, especially for a super portable gigging option for things like busking. These ports will not only send a cleaner, higher quality signal to an amp than a headphone port is going to, but having these ports also means that the 20-watt speakers will still be active as monitors to help me hear myself. On almost all of the other super portable keyboards I've tested, including my Casio Tone CTS1, I have to use the headphone port to connect to an amp which mutes the onboard speakers. It is a bit strange that these ports on the Recital are RCA instead of the usual 1/4 inch TR ports, but they still work the same, and there are lots of cables and adapters out there. I actually bought a really nice RCA to TR cable on Amazon for about $15. The one thing I really wish the Recital had is an auxiliary in port. This would allow me to stream backing tracks in from my iPad or computer or whatever to play along with. But not the end of the world. I can always use a portable mixer for that, or I could just use up another port on my portable Bose PA system for the backing tracks. Speakers. The speakers on the Alesis 61 are 20 watts, and they're decent sounding, by no means spectacular. But they're plenty loud enough for practice, and they will be super handy to have enabled as monitors while connected to an amplifier. Here's a quick video on the speakers as picked up by my built-in microphone on my iPhone. Okay, other features. There's 2 built-in songs, and there's a built-in short demo of each voice. There's an auto power off feature that you can enable or disable after 30 minutes. There's also an option to restore factory settings. This is easy to do. Just hold layer and function for 5 seconds. I actually do this once in a while since there's no display. If I've accidentally changed something in function mode, then this is a quick way to reset everything if I need to. So what's missing or could be improved on the Recital 61? An auxiliary in to stream in backing tracks or piano lessons, YouTube, that type of thing to play along with would really be handy. And just a couple more quick access buttons for transposing so you don't have to do that in the function menu. So like plus minus buttons to transpose keys up and down, and plus minus buttons to shift octaves up and down would be super, super handy. And then also handy, but not quite as handy, would be buttons to choose chorus and reverb types. The other thing that it really needs is a better music rest. The totally open design for the music rest doesn't hold up a tablet easily, and paper and smaller books can easily fall through. So a solid music rest would be very welcome. Either that or even just another bar or something across the middle to keep things from falling through. Okay, so the other choices. So I mentioned the list of all the keyboards I've reviewed before and trying to find a super portable option for a piano player who's used to playing fully weighted keys. And the 2 that stood out the most were the Yamaha PSR E373 and the Casio Tone CTS1, with the Casio Tone CTS1 being the one that I settled on and typically recommend to fill that need. So the Recital 61 at around $200 versus the Yamaha PSR E373 also at around $200. The PSR E373 is a fantastic keyboard with a great user interface that has a screen, tons of voices, and a very high-end piano sample, built-in rhythms and arranger features, and an audio interface built into the USB port. But the PSR E373 has no line-out ports, it has a narrower octave width, slimmer rounded black keys, and a very light synth action feel. So transitioning back and forth between a piano with full-size, true full-sized, fully weighted keys and the PSR E373 can be pretty challenging, at least for me. The Alesis Recital 61 sounds aren't quite as good, although the organ might actually be better. But the sounds are decent and totally usable, and the Recital has line-out ports and provides a far more piano-like playing experience because of the familiar key size, shape, and the semi-weighted feel. So the Alesis Recital 61 at $200 versus the Casio Tone CTS1 at around $220. The Casio Tone CTS1 is a fabulous keyboard with tons to offer. It has great voices, a great user interface for selecting the main sounds. That interface does become frustrating when it comes to selecting voices that aren't tied into the main panel buttons, though, and also for layering voices because that requires memorizing function key combinations on the CTS1. The CTS1 definitely offers a more piano-like playing experience than the Yamaha PSR E373 does, which is why I bought it, because the keys offer more resistance and are almost a semi-weighted feel. But like the Yamaha, the CTS-1 still falls short of the Alesis Recital 61 in a few key areas for me. It's got no line out ports, so you lose the use of the speakers when you connect it to an external amplification or PA system or something. If you do have voices layered with the key combinations on the CTS-1, you can't just glance at the keyboard to see what your current selections are like you can on the Recital. And while the keys are heavier than the PSR E373, they're still not as heavy as the Recitals, and like the Yamaha, they have that narrower octave width, and the black keys are narrow and slightly rounded. So once again, the Recital provides a more familiar playing experience if you're used to fully weighted, full-size keys on a digital piano. Okay, so the verdict. What's my verdict on the Alesis Recital 61? Basically, when it comes down to is what is important to you. If you're looking for a super portable keyboard that is easy to transition to from a fully weighted piano that can be used to perform with in a low-key setting like busking especially, I think the Recital 61 is my new favorite option. While keyboards like the PSR E373 or the Casio Tone CTS-1 are both great keyboards and can also be used for that purpose, the Recital 61 simply provides a much more piano-like playing experience to me and feel than either of these other two keyboards. And with a small but well-chosen set of decent sounds, a super simple, easy, and intuitive user interface, and proper line-out ports for connecting to external audio, it's definitely my top choice for the use case I'm testing it for. Now, where that decision can get a little bit muddied, though, is would I recommend buying the Alesis Recital 61 for your only keyboard or piano? In that case, it really depends on whether the portable performance features like the lineouts and the easy functional user interface and the more realistic piano-like playing experience with the heavier keys and the fully sized keys are more important to you than the slightly higher quality sounds you're going to find on the Yamaha or the Casio. If the performance features matter more, I would still recommend the Alesis Recital 61, but if making recordings with higher quality voices matters more to you, then you might want to lean towards the Yamaha or the Casio. For me, my main piano is my new Yamaha DGX 670, which I absolutely love, but it is 50 pounds and very far from being portable. So the Alesis Recital 61 is perfect as a new go-to option for a super portable keyboard that even runs on batteries. And keep in mind, if you're looking for an entry-level digital piano, but you don't want to break the bank with your first purchase, then the Recital 61 or the 88-key version, the Alesis Recital, are great options for getting started, since they at least have true full-sized semi-weighted keys. So with all that in mind, I would definitely recommend the Alesis Recital 61 as a super portable option for a piano player. So thanks so much, and happy piano playing and happy piano shopping. Have an awesome day.